welcome to Russ's Kitchen. I'm going to show you my recipe for meatballs. Really delicious, very simple, they don't take a lot of ingredients and they're loved by children and adults alike. So let's have a look at what we're going to need. Obviously we're going to need meat. I'm using beef mince, which I've got from my butcher. It's really nice quality. You could also use half pork mince, half beef, and even half veal, half beef. It's entirely up to you, but this is what I'm going to be using. I've got 3 small slices of white bread that I've taken the crusts off, some ground black pepper, about 3 tablespoons of milk, an egg, and some ground cayenne pepper. So the first thing we're going to do is break up the white bread into the milk before we start making the meatballs. Right, we're going to take our bread and all I'm going to do is rip it up into rough little pieces. You don't have to be very exact about this at all. That's going to go into the milk and it's going to soak up the milk. The whole point of this is that we're going to incorporate this into the meatball mixture and it's going to help to keep the meatballs really nice and moist. The idea behind these wonderful meatballs is that they not only taste delicious, but they are juicy and moist and extremely moorish. So there you go. That is the bread into the milk. I'm going to set that aside and bring on our bowl, and I'm going to break up this mince just a little bit. We don't want a great big block of mince to mix up, so just roughly break that up into the bowl. We're going to put our egg in. That is our binding agent. Black pepper. And just a tiny bit of cayenne pepper, just to give it a little bit of kick, an extra dimension to the flavour, an extra layer to the flavour. And then we're going to take our bread, make sure that it's nicely absorbed with that milk, mix it around a little bit. And then we're going to take it and just break it up over the top of our minced beef. And then, hands in, mix all this together until it comes together in a really nice consistency. Time to form this into our meatballs. Now, how big you want to make these meatballs is entirely up to you. I'm going to kind of try and go for maybe, I don't know, the size of a golf ball, which I think is a decent size. You can make them bigger if you want. Actually, I've had meatballs in a restaurant in Rome and they came as actually really quite big, and you only got 3 of them, but they were much larger than I expected. Absolutely delicious. But one thing that was really nice was they actually didn't taste that much different from what I'm showing you here. So let's start forming our meatballs. Like I said, I'm looking, or trying to look at, about a golf ball size, maybe slightly larger. It's your choice. Get them in your hand, roll them in your palms, and there you go, a nice size meatball. Going to put that on a plate and carry on. Now at this point, if you do find that your meat is starting to stick to your hands, just run your hands under the cold tap and that will help them not to stick. but they are looking really, really good. If you wanted to get really, really technical, you could always actually weigh out your meatball mixture so they get perfect, but I'm really not that bothered about being that perfect because they're just so tasty and yummy. Who cares how big they are? There we go. That's about 500 grams of beef mince making that amount of meatballs, and I think they look pretty good. I guarantee you they're going to taste amazing. So the next thing we're going to do, pop these into the fridge for about 20-25 minutes, and while they're chilling we can get on and start making our tomato sauce to go with it. Now it's not just a case of putting some tomatoes or some chopped tomatoes in a pan and cooking it through. This is a little bit different, and this is why this recipe steers a little bit more towards the American Italian style, and it's something that I've tried and I've changed, but this really does work for me. So obviously we're going to start with our tomatoes. I've got a small can of chopped tomatoes. Don't go with the very cheapest, go with something that's, you know, a little bit better. I've got 250 ml of vegetable stock. I've got some tomato passata here, about 150 to 200 ml. Now, if you want to buy a tub of passata, you're only going to be using 200 ml. Why not just measure out the water and add in tomato puree until you get your sauce that you need? It's a lot more economical and it works, trust me. And also a pinch of sugar. The first thing we're going to do is get our tomatoes into a saucepan. I'm just going to rinse that out with a little bit of water, and I'm going to add that to our mixture. Now I'm going to take a hand blender and I'm going to blitz this down a little bit. If you want to keep your sauce fairly chunky, if you want to keep more tomato texture to it, absolutely fine, do what you want to do. For this, I actually prefer it to be a lot smoother, so I'm going to just blitz this down a little bit just to get rid of the chunkiness of the tomato. Right, so I've blitzed down that tomato. Into that I'm going to put our tomato puree or passata. I'm going to put in a little bit. I'm not going to put all of the vegetable stock, I'm just going to put a little bit in. Probably about half. And then a little pinch of sugar, just to take the bitterness and the tartness from that tomato, and especially if you're cooking this for children, they're going to love that much more. Now we're going to get this onto a really low heat, and we're going to just let it cook, let it bubble away for about 25 minutes, half an hour. We don't want it to reduce too much at this stage, which is why we've kept some of our vegetable stock back, because if it does start to reduce we can just top it up again. The reason for that is that this sauce is going to be cooking our meatballs. We're going to cook the meatballs in the sauce. So let's put this on a very low heat and let it cook. Now it's time to brown off our meatballs. I've got a little bit of olive oil that's been heating up in this frying pan. We're going to put the meatballs in and we're going to make sure that they get a nice colour on all sides, and that's all we're going to do. We don't need to cook them any more than that, because remember, the main cooking of these meatballs is going to be in the tomato sauce. So let's put our meatballs into the frying pan. And then all we're going to do is just move them around, keep them moving, and then make sure they're browned on all sides. So our meatballs have now got some nice colour on, some nice caramelisation. Turning the heat off, I'm going to move them off the heat. Now before we put them into the tomato sauce, I'm just going to season the tomato sauce. A little bit of pepper and some salt. Now you probably realise that I didn't season the meatball mixture with salt. That's because we took a lot of trouble with the bread in the milk to make sure the meatballs are going to be really nice and moist. So what they don't want to do is then put salt in, which is only going to draw the moisture out, which is why we didn't season the meatballs with salt. So let's now put our meatballs into our tomato sauce. They are going to cook away now for again another 25 minutes, maybe half an hour. Just give that a little gentle shake so that the meatballs disappear into that tomato sauce. As you can see, I'm going to put the lid back on and I'm going to let that bubble away now, like I say, for about 25 minutes, half an hour. What I want to see is for that sauce to be reducing and becoming really lovely and thick. What we don't want is like a really watery tomato sauce that's going to go with our meatballs. So there you go, that's on, it's cooking away. Next thing is to get ready for our pasta. So our meatballs and our tomato sauce are now thickening up. They're looking really good. I've got a pan of salted boiling water here. It's all ready. I'm going to go in with some tagliatelle. Obviously meatballs, you're going to want to use probably spaghetti, that's absolutely fine. But I've got tagliatelle in the cupboard. Just use what you've got. You can use any pasta at all. It's still going to work. So I'm going to put this into the boiling water, 8 to 10 minutes, and then we're going to be ready. Our meatballs and our tomato sauce have reduced down. That looks fantastic. Our pasta is cooked. So let's plate up. And we're going to take our tagliatelle. Like I said before, you use whatever pasta you want to use. It's entirely up to you. Let's get some gorgeous meatballs on top of that. It really does smell quite fantastic. One more, I think. Why not? I'm going to put some of the sauce that is now thickened right up. That's going to taste amazing. A little bit more. Now, a little bit of garnish. Let's take some chopped parsley. And if you want to, just finish it off with some finely grated parmesan. Why not? Let's make it indulgent. And that, meatballs with pasta in an amazing tomato sauce, really is fantastic. You're gonna love it.